Hi, it's Susan from Worldpeacefull, and I felt to do a video. I'm going to talk about Edward Snowden, and I'm going to talk about Julian Assange, and I'm going to allow any sort of inspiration to move the narrative here. It's going to come from a space of love, and that includes the United States, the deep state, the United Kingdom, Australia. I'm going to create a video on the basis of loving them all, because no one ever thinks to unconditionally love all the players in these dramas and then try and distill out what we're learning about ourselves as a result of it. And of course, I'm no expert on the subject matter, but I have done some reading on it, and I watched Snowden last night, the movie, and I've just done some reading on Julian Assange and various perspectives. But before I do that, I'm just going to allow inspiration to move this video, because I prefer to come from no expectation. I prefer to come from, I don't want to have a vested interest in the video itself. I'm just allowing inspiration to move me. That's all I really want to do, and just see what happens. That's the nature of going still. So I'm going to turn the light off and, in a sense, hold a candle to this, because we're living in a world where everyone's confused. It's very evident. We're also living in a very detached space where people have lost contact with their humanity, and there are those who wish to expand that disconnect. So I might go still for a while as I contemplate these events. I can hear the rain outside. There's cars going past a lot. Traffic's increased. And what the cars represent to me is the speed of life speeding up. And it's to do with the juggernaut of economics. As more and more people get engaged within this economic paradigm, more are rushing towards trying to make money, trying to be successful. They have these ideas reinforced through business schools. They get rewarded by business communities who wish to continue on the treadmill of economics. Now, at the same token, I can hear the rain and I can feel the wind outside. So nature comes to me very strongly. And the word disruption, in connection with nature, in actual fact, because we are nature. So even those who are creating the narrative around smart cities, disruption, STEM education, which is science, technology, engineering and maths, which is a very it's very left brain, intellectual, linear way of seeing the world. Now, balance comes to me immediately in the sense that real peace is not just when all the fighting stops. Real peace is actually being at peace when the fighting gets really intense. I can't say I've mastered it yet, but I'm working on it. But I know that's what it is. So you don't get to leave the room when the yelling starts. Most people wish to dash into distractions. We don't want to look at what's going on in the world. It's too scary. We don't want to speak up. What happens? We get terrified. We see policemen, we get frightened because we're conditioned to fear authority. what's authority? Our parents. That's where we learned it. So from a very early age, we've had authority figures that we have done as we're told, and if we don't, there's a consequence. Although those consequences are becoming further and further apart as society breaks down, because we're seeing a complete deconstruct in respect of social order. Social harmony is evident in a society, because I experience it. But for many people, it's social order, because they don't really connect with the people they're moving past. They don't know their neighbours anymore. They're busy. They're buying the latest this, that and the other, thinking it's going to enable them to keep up with the world as it changes. But the changes are far more profound than the technological shift. There's actually a shift in consciousness happening. Now, I feel very strongly to convey the reason why we're learning all about these issues in respect of government is because things are surfacing on the planet that have been hidden. There are those who believe that secrecy is security, and that in order to have security, you have to give up your rights and your freedoms. Well, that's up for questioning. Is that true? I'm secure myself and I'm not giving up my rights, but my security comes from my freedom. In other words, the freedom I feel within myself is the freedom to choose. And because I have had a shift in consciousness, which means I have awakened to the fact there is a spiritual reality around us. And I have seen it. I've actually seen. I remember I was in a flat in Strathmore here in Melbourne. And I was just in a little unit attached to a house. I knew the people who owned the house. And I was in the kitchen talking to one of my friends. And we saw an apparition. It was a man. And we both just went, oh my God, that was a man in a jumper. So we're talking a ghost here, okay? Apparition. We both saw it at the same time. Therefore, how can an unbodied human come past the kitchen? And it's funny, you know, I have felt his presence before, but I hadn't seen him. So what he's providing me with is proof, tangible evidence that we live on. Spiritual. It's a spirit. It doesn't have a physical body. It's not wearing clothes, even though it had a jumper on. I'm going to briefly tell you about an interviewer I had working for me when I was in market research. And for the fun of it, I thought I'd do some research into near-death experience and out-of-body. I thought I'd be curious to see what people say. Now, she actually responded to my ad. She was one of my interviewers. I was very surprised. And we sat and we talked, and I recorded our conversation, and she told me that going out of her body was natural. She thought when she was young that everyone did it, until she discovered that actually she was quite unique. She said when she was in a lot of pain, she was able to sit on the cupboard, she said, so move out of her body, and she could oversight her body. Now, I'm going to actually move into interesting subject matter here. And I can only report what I was told. But what she said was her husband, who had died, they'd been married 21 years, he died of cancer. He came to her. And she said he wore the shorts that she always hated. Maybe a bit of humour on the other side, I suspect so. And he asked her to come with him. And she said, no, we have a son. But she was able to go out of her body, so the two of them were able to move together to see the son. He was in another country. Now people go, oh, that can't be true. Well, I don't know. I can only say what I heard, and she worked with me, and I can only say that she certainly seemed honest to me. I can't say I saw what she saw, but I can only report what was told to me. She also said she had been able to go through time. She went to the fire of, I think it was Rome. It's been a long time since we talked. We're talking many, many years now. And she said she went into the future, but I can't remember what that was about, actually. I'd have to find the tape. I'm just going with a stream of consciousness right now. So there is a reality around us, is the point being shared here. And what it awakens within you when you encounter it is there's more to the world than the physical. Many of us feel very secure in the material world. We've got houses, security systems in the West. In the third world, not so much. The poor don't have that. We might have security through relationships, a job. And what security is really meaning here is that I feel safe. It also means I can access food, shelter, clothing, and probably additional things that I need when I need them. This is why work comes into this paradigm. Work is the activity of populations around the world that are governed by corporations, which are top-down entities. They are hierarchical, they are not democratic. So the culture within corporations has never been democratic unless there have been some enlightened leaders who have chosen to either offer shares to staff to participate equally in that entity, which would give it more of an egalitarian, more of a democratic flavour. Ricardo Semler was he was Brazilian, running a company where that's exactly what was done. The staff shared the ownership of the company. Now, this is not communism. This is not left wing. This is technically expanding the decision making into the community who actually produce the product. It's inclusive of those whose energy go into the production of the output, whatever that is. It's also incentivizing too, because those people who feel they've got shares in it are going to work harder, be more innovative. So there's, certainly productivity gains when you include more people. And it's the same in any sort of venture. The more people you bring on board, the more people that get to participate, the more people that see the reward in that is going to create that collective. Now, for some, there is great fear around the empowerment of the collective because they feel there's a loss of power as a result of sharing of power. The words that come to me right now would be more in line with sum of the parts exceeds the whole. So there's more wealth in actual fact through the sharing. We have a paradigm in our world which is about taking. I need to get the most money I can. Profit maximization in economics is what we call it. With that comes influence. I get special privileges because I'm wealthy. I get my Learjet, I can take off, can bribe a few people for those who aren't honest, and they do. In various countries, that's the norm. Bribery can be what they would call doing business. It's pretty much, they would articulate it as, well, that's the way they do things there, we'll just join in. We're all here to make money, right? So the moral landscape doesn't exist within that type of awareness. It's all about the goal of making the money, which they're all indoctrinated into as well. So we've got employees, we've got systems of management, some hierarchical, some inclusive, very small percentage inclusive, like that. We have resources being extracted in order to produce those products or services. But we've also got the ecological collapse. I'm going to call it a collapse because that's what I'm seeing it as. So when I alluded to the trees blowing, the wind blowing outside and the rain, I'm bringing in the ecological picture here because this is the pink elephant that they all ignore. We're still doing business as usual. Great structures have been created over time in order to maintain power. The notion of democracy has not been experienced in Western countries, in truth, although it has enabled, the notion of democracy has enabled freedom of speech, which is probably where it's anchored most strongly. If we're talking about sharing power at the table, I've seldom had the experience where I've been included as an equal, either in an economic capacity. I have, as a consultant, experienced equality, but that's because I had a higher status. So I was perceived as equal, one of us, so to speak, from a business point of view. As an employee, no, never. I was paid to do the job, not to think, unless the job was thinking, which I have done as well. But ultimately, we're paying you, you do as we say. So this is like the parent. This is the authoritarian. This is the power structure. We are going through a shift of consciousness on the planet, which is not really about particular people spreading the message of this high consciousness. It's not really about that, because it's a little bit like the 100 monkey. People are literally awakening to it. I met someone, I remember I went for a walk. This was probably a year ago now. We met on the path and we just had a chat. And she's going, something's changing in me. And she was saying, I'm just letting go of my friends. I need to be alone. I'm really looking at my life. I'm looking at the world. And I'm changing. I remember when I was in Chile, I met a guy who was an environmentalist. He surprised me in that he also was acknowledging a shift in consciousness around the planet. I've met many who have been thinking the same thing. I've literally been walking across the road and we start chatting. I start chatting with someone and they're thinking the same as me. And I just go, wow, isn't that interesting? It really is a spontaneous shift in consciousness that's happening to people without necessarily any influence from anybody else. I see it as the next evolutionary step. Alongside that is the voice of the sixth mass extinction. And it's like there is polarities developing where there are those who are seeing that the world will continue, and there are those that are seeing the world ending. There's also religious mythology around that too, in respect of the end times. And, the belief of good versus evil, all this sort of stuff. In the higher perspective, and I don't mean it as a superior thing, I'm just sort of seeing it more as a higher frequency, which is a lighter approach at looking at the world. It's not a heavy, dense, we call that lower frequency. In the higher frequency, you start to acknowledge that all of it is one, which is why I started this by saying I acknowledge also through love. I look at the United States, the Australians, the UK, Snowden, Assange. I'm using those two because they're the whistleblowers, they're the big ones who have released lots of secrets. And of course, secrecy is security, is freedom for them. And as I've gone through this narrative, I'm trying to explain what freedom is about and the true security that comes from within as we shift to a higher consciousness that sees no enemy, that sees an event coming back to us in the shape of something that appears to be threatening if we don't question it. McNamara comes to mind, US Defense Secretary, in the fog of war, when he recognised we're shrouded in this fog. We're believing things and we're making errors because we're caught up in the actual war. And that war is coming from within us. It's not actually outside of us. And people go, how can that be true? There was 3 military Chinese ships come into Sydney Harbour. That is military ships coming into our harbour without permission. I laugh. Interesting how they shrouded themselves. I'd be interested to know more about that. But anyway, what I'm saying here is the threat is not outside, it's within. And that also includes the Chinese leadership, who I send love to as well. You're also seeing the threat. You're also jumping on the same economic bandwagon, and you're going to make the same mistakes that industry's made for over 100 years or more, 200, 300. Because you too are seeking security. It's a dominant type of paradigm. The control paradigm, the top-down paradigm, are what we call dominator economics. There is another form of economic perspective, which is caring economics. Now they might go, oh, that's socialism. No, it's not. It's caring for humans. As the greatest national security is to care for the other. That means to care for the Chinese, to care for the United States, the US people, to care for the Middle East people. That's inclusive of the beautiful Israelis, the beautiful Arabs, all the different ethnic and Christian or Muslim religious denominations, without saying, I'm against you, you are wrong. No. Everyone is experiencing what they need to experience because they're all here on journeys. Remember I talked about the man who was the ghost I saw. He's not haunting, but he was hovering around this place where I was as if he's connecting to that space for some reason. But as I said, he was a ghost. What I'm saying is we live on, and I'm saying that these journeys we're all on are unfolding as they should. We are seeing the ending of an illusion. We are seeing the breakdown of secrecy through those of conscience who have decided that the release of the information is more important in their lives, and they know what they're up against. People go missing. People get taken away. We know about the rendition. We know about people being harmed, destroyed, or killed in the name of protecting interests, protecting a way of life, protecting status, as if to lose that would be to lose your very self. So there's a huge threat to those who believe, and I put the emphasis on the word believe, that other is posing a threat when they're not, in truth. The threat is unquestioned thinking always. The fog of war is the unquestioned thinking. There's also more discussion now about the deep state, which is the projects that are unacknowledged. They are not being put up against public scrutiny. And the reason that's important is because the public are paying for it. Public are paying for everything. The public are paying for all the corporate profiting. The public are the ones who are both actively involved in the system and also consuming from the system. So we're all in this together. And in order to move out of the fog of war, you have to become more still. You have programmed in a way of seeing that you believe is true. Yet one only has to look at what is the result of following that path. Is it bringing you truly what you believe that you're wanting? Or is it getting more and more messy, more and more complicated? Are there more and more people rising up? Can you truly control the world through full spectrum dominance? And I want to bring that one in because that's what the US military has stated in its last paper, defence paper, I guess, or the one I read anyway. I don't know if there's one been updated since then, but it certainly was full spectrum dominance, and it was looking at the theatre of war in the cyber area. And of course, everyone's jumping on board with that one. Well, and of course, Julian Assange, he is the media equivalent of engaging in this cyber activity, which has revealed secrets that has not only embarrassed, but it has taken down, if you like, the veil of secrecy, where obviously in this case the United States has been seen in a certain light, and then this veil's come down and criminality is being alleged. Illegal wars have been alleged. But there has been no judicial response to this because we're living in what would be called sort of a Lockean world where they're really, really justice, International Court of Justice is not really operating appropriately in order to address allegations that are being raised. People are typically going to journalists now because the judicial system, the tribunals in various cases may not well be functioning in a fully neutral way. We've also got the corporatisation of government, which is another problematic change because it puts government in the position of being a business. And certainly within these two-party systems, we've got Labor typically, which was traditionally left. It's not really now, it's more to the right. And you've got your liberal or conservative perspective. Liberal in Australia is not the Democrat in the United States. Liberal here is conservative, which typically reflects business interests. From my perspective, I don't consider either side reflective of the wider population and certainly the society itself, because they typically are within a business paradigm. It doesn't really invite recognition of those outside of a business paradigm. And that would include the artists, entertainers, really, the free spirits, the elderly, the young, mothers, grandparents, you know what I mean. So all of those who are typically not identifying with either being a worker or an employer are marginalised. They're not actually included in that. And of course, there'll be the ideological differences of those who don't actually support the system at all, who don't believe in capitalism, those who believe democracy doesn't work or isn't happening. And they may have a whole host of other ideas that they think would be better forms of social collectivism in order for some of the parts to exceed the whole. Because ultimately what our end goal is here is for everyone to expand on some level, for everyone to feel a sense of abundance, whether that's monetary or not, doesn't really matter. I don't live with money that much now, so I have an abundance in respect of all my needs being met. And because I'm what I call reclining into Buddha, I'm not a Buddhist, but I use that terminology. I like what Buddha stood for or sat for, really. He was meditator. And interestingly enough, his story is he was wealthy in the court, the part of the royal family, I'm assuming. Please forgive me if I get this wrong. It's been a while since I looked at Buddha's story. But let's just say he was with the ruling class. He was within the walls of that ruling group. He thought life was very wealthy, life was abundant, there was no suffering in his world growing up. And you can see this as the mirror to those who are living like that see themselves as a ruling class. They tend to silo themselves off and they tend to really move around those who are of like mind. So we get sort of what we call glee clubs of reinforced beliefs that maintain that belief of superiority over the masses who are really just the workers who are supposed to give us what we're really wanting. They do all the work, we do all the thinking, It's genetic. I was told this by someone in their group. They believe they're genetically superior. Anyway, I'm just playing with that because I can see there is a cluster of perspectives. So Buddha apparently left the, let's just say, castle for the want of another word, and he ventured out into the society where he witnessed the great suffering. People dying. He didn't know people died because he never got to see it. He was living in privilege. He saw the suffering, the hunger, and he realised the world was not this utopia that he was living in, and of which those walls that were built up around him were seeking to maintain that utopia. But the reality is the outside world was many things, and most of the people were not living in that type of false security, or fake security, really. It's not a real world. And this is where the psychological, or the shift in consciousness, came to him. He sat under the Bodhi tree. I've actually seen the Bodhi tree when I was in Asia. I was in Vietnam, actually. I found I actually took, I was a bit naughty. I was in my apologies to those people in this Buddhist temple, but they said, do not take leaves off the Bodhi tree. And I did. I took a leaf. And I ended up writing a poem because I'd had a problem at the hotel where I actually had electric shock. I saw the electricity jump out of the wall socket, went right up my arm, and it blew up my computer. I may laugh, but I cried at the time. I got a real shock. And this lovely lady helped me. And it was for her that I wrote the poem, and I stuck the Bodhi leaf onto the poem because it was about her loving kindness towards me when I was really feeling quite, shocked and isolated at the time. And I was in a strange country and I didn't know anyone. I was there doing some clowning with an NGO. That's why I went, the doctor. So the Bodhi tree was where he sat, meditating. He went into meditation. I'm just going still for a moment. See, inner illumination comes from within, not without. Answers come from within, not without. So when we're in this chaotic time, which is an interesting one, because order can often be established in order to say, hey, here's the saving. I'm the savior of this chaos. I will save you. And people go, oh, yeah, I'll give my power over to that. So what I'm saying is he was learning that the outer world was not the real world. The real world was actually inside himself. So he meditated for a very long time as he sought inner illumination to understand the great poverty that he had witnessed and the great pain and suffering, because he saw life as suffering. It was hugely a stark contrast to a world of abundance where all one's needs are met and living in a utopia. He sat there until he awakened, which is the shift in consciousness I'm talking about. It's the awakening. So in our world, the whistleblowers, the clarion call for those of certain persuasions is coming to pull down an illusion that's been in place for quite a long time. It's coming to the end of an era is what this is really about. And those who have lived in these privileged spaces where they've had everything they've ever needed, and they've set up a situation where to ensure that that way of life is sustained. Because without it, they feel they have no identity. They feel that they're vulnerable because this is what they're accustomed to. They don't want their world to shatter. They don't want the real world to come flooding in. And that real world is really to awaken to the real power, which has got nothing to do with control. In fact, control has everything to do with fear, which is termed as false evidence appearing real. But the fear is coming from our mortality, fear of death, our fear of hunger, which has its seed, if you like, in probably the collective consciousness altogether that Carl Jung would talk about. I think we've all, deep within us, have this fear of starvation, a fear of homelessness, of which I'm experiencing, which is really, in my particular case, I see the world as my home now. I see life as the dynamic that supports me now, not people. So the great fear that's going on around the world now is the shattering of many illusions. This is why there's an attack on freedom of speech. This is why there's great threat felt with people like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, who have revealed mass surveillance, mass data gathering. So those things that were well hidden are now coming to light. And we also can look at the Five Eyes network, which is an intelligence network: Australia, UK, New Zealand, Canada, US. Caucasian countries, I noted. I didn't know about that. And so when we talk about countries around the world, we go, oh, the US is this. We're talking about a small group who are in the political spectrum and in the various apparatuses that support that power. We're not talking about the entire US population. The US population is the same as the Australian population, the same as the UK population. We're all working for this, in this system that is telling us that if you work hard enough, you'll be able to buy your house. But we're seeing these things slipping away. And this is why it's all falling apart, because the promise of prosperity, which is the word that's used, is fading for the middle classes around those, particularly in those countries that have been seen as wealthy. You can even use the countries as wealthy as another reflection on living in that castle. And often we see the walls erecting. Those walls can also be protectionist policies, where you might put up tariffs to block out competitors. We call them trade walls. And that's a way of protecting what you think is your industry so that you can make more profits. So their price of their product goes up because they're meeting with a tariff. So we're really dealing on a number of levels of many wars. There's trade wars. We've also seen the physical wars in Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, the Balkans. We've seen the uprisings through the Arab Spring. This is all conflict happening as paradigms are falling down, as walls are falling down, as illusions are falling down, as people start to awaken because they have no choice. It's like they have to question what's going on because they've felt great fear and their way of life is gone. And because we're all connected as a global community, and we are, and you know that, I'll give you an example. If somebody is going to, let's just say you're thinking of someone and they ring you. That's part of the collective conscious. I've often had moments where something I've been contemplating has shown up around me, and I see that as linked. I think energetically our thoughts are electromagnetic. That's why we can magnetize through thought, through word. This is why freedom of speech can become problematic, because if somebody is magnetic, they are going to attract people, and then others feel there might be a movement that gathers around that one who's reflecting something that anchors in truth, because all of us are connected and something within us recognizes the truth. This is why, from a popular point of view, Snowden and Assange would be, I think for the most part, I think most people are actually, let's just say, I just want to go still on that because I don't really want to just throw out words without thinking them through or feeling them through. Yeah, what I'm getting is Snowden and Julian Assange, Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, are giving expression to truth. Now, why I say that is that the world community is actually hungry to hear the truth. They want to know what's going on. So when revelations come up and an individual risks their life, it's clearly they're putting the story ahead of their own life. People admire that because they realise they're doing it, on their behalf. There's a love that's moving that person, which is why I started this video with the intent of love. They also have made a decision, I don't want this type of world to emerge. In the case of Snowden, he didn't want to feel that his every movement was being watched. What really hit him was when he was looking at that surveillance program where they put in the keywords, and when he was when the IT guy was looking at a woman who took off her burqa and was stripping, and he's getting fascinated because he's wanting to perv on her. He saw the moral depravity of that, where someone is just taking the liberty of invading someone's privacy. And in this case, the laptop was off. He saw a line being crossed. Now, what happens when we don't have checks and balances? And this is also in the military circles, no real checks and balances, particularly if they're operations that are not getting oversight. But then we have the problem too of corporations creating donations to particular political figures who then take up their cause. And that is the perversion of democracy. It perverts the course of real justice if we've got wealthy companies, individuals currying favour through buying influence. That is deceptive. That works counter to the democratic discourse, which states that elections are carried out in order for the voice of the people to actually be that influence. And this is why there's a huge hue and cry about what's going on, because people can see they're losing their voice. They recognise the veil is coming down. We interact with government, we get these standard letters that mean nothing. We get quoted legislation which means nothing to us. We don't have a Bill of Rights, certainly here in Australia we don't. We've got some constitutional protections, but I note that that's not really being adhered to. The corporatisation, the contracting out of services is denuding the government from the traditional sense of it being the representative of the people. If those services are being subcontracted out or privatised off, people have no say. Freedom of information requests are irrelevant when you're dealing with a private company. This conversation hasn't been had in our society. The public don't know that the libraries have been corporatised. I know that here in Australia. Most people don't have any idea. They know they're getting asked for ID more and they don't understand why. They don't realise, that there's corporatisation of government happening and has happened. They are not privy to the boardroom meetings in respect of industry representatives and those who have been appointed as officials. We don't know what the diplomatic pouches are carrying when they're moving between diplomats in order to send messages from one country to another. We're not privy to that because it's not open government. Some will say it's national security. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. We don't know because we're outside of all of this. And because there's no real strong checks and balances to power, I mean, in the Westminster system, the idea there was a separation of powers doctrine, which was to separate the executive, sort of like in Australia Cabinet, from the judiciary and the bureaucracy were to be separate. So no political interference. It's not meant to be politicians accessing in order to further their own agendas. It's supposed to have a separation of powers. The judiciary has to be neutral. But if they become and are, I shouldn't say if, a operational business, and let's say they have a bias towards privilege because they've come from that genre, that status, then clearly there's going to be a bias towards those of the lower socioeconomic. They see them as lower. These are the poorer people. In truth, we're all equal, we're all born equal. I'm very much in the Lincoln mindset. You know, I'm a great believer in equality. Not just believer in it, I know it because I know I'm equal. I call it the equality tone. It's like a kind of a low-level humming of life, if you like, that all exists on the planet. It's meant to be here. So the veil is coming down. What to do? Where to go? The advice I can offer as a peacemaker is you have to make peace with those you have seen as the enemy. And that can be activists who are railing against the injustices of governments. It can be governments who are railing against the activists, seeing them as the enemy. It can be the great fear of a full spectrum dominance rooting in to an IT type system around the world. I see it as the smart cities. I believe that's the system that's set up as a surveillance system. That's my opinion from the reading I'm doing, because it's real-time data. The smart meters attached to houses, it's been imposed on people, and that's collecting data on activity in the household. And the sophistication of IT infrastructure is such these days that they can profile very easily. We've also got facial recognition. So anywhere you go, cameras are picking you up. You might be passing 1,000, maybe 2,000 cameras in a city. And if they're all interconnected through the one NBN system, let's say, because the NBN here in Australia is being constructed, and that's for downloads, they say. It's an intelligent energy system where it's very much, I think, operating like a LAN network, a local area network or access. So I don't believe it's just passive power coming into your computer. This computer is receiving energy that's being monitored by a smart meter, but there's also the NBN as well. So that's what I see. I see it as an attempt to create greater control, because I think there's greater fear. And because I think the whistleblowers have made evident that there are activities occurring around the world that are not in the public interest. And again, what do people do in this? Firstly, you go still. When I go still, what I see is I know that negativity breaks down anything, really. It's a deconstructive type of energy. Loving energy is a constructive energy. It can boost. We feel enthusiastic, we feel inspired, we feel active, we're keen. When it's negative, we feel shut down, we feel disempowered, we feel anxious, maybe depressed, despondent, in despair. And all illnesses come out of that type of negativity. It's part of the duality, the yin and the yang of life. Now, the peace is really about the balance between the two. So yes, there's going to be moments where I might feel a sense of despair about where the world is going. I see the pollution, I see the rise in cancer, I see the electromagnetic field that's being created in our cities. I see the destruction of the rainforests, depletion of the oceans. What I perceive as military is out of control, and I do see them as out of control as they attempt to control. I send love to them, but that's what I see. No checks and balances, not enough, and not really sensitive to the various needs, and really questioning deeply the paradigm of control and security. And I say that again with love and respect, and I do feel that. I've met many soldiers, and I do love everyone, to be honest. And I know from the perspectives of each of them, they believe what they're doing is the right thing. There'll be honourable reasons behind why some of them are doing it. Others, of course, may have a very clear idea of why they're doing it, and they don't care at all. And I see that as well. And that's the diversity in which I live. So in order for me to maintain a state of homeostasis, I must be at peace with who they all are, but particularly at peace with who I am. So as I've stated at the very beginning of this, our world is going through great change, disruption, and it is. I see it more as ecological than the IT narrative, because I see the forces of nature are far, far more powerful. And as that, I was going to say sort of unwinds, but it's not the right word. I'll try and articulate it in the sense that the climates are shifting. The magnetic poles are moving. The solar radiation from the sun is intensifying. The nature is chaotic because it's being moved out of its homeostasis because of human activity, and it is human-induced, definitely. It's also cosmic events too. It's both. I want to sit with that for a moment, and I'm not necessarily saying I'm right, by the way. I'm just giving you reflections on the basis of who I am, coming from my inner world, and I'm very open to being wrong, and I'm very open to other perspectives. So always you are at liberty to choose what you think is true or not. So I just want to contemplate the earth changes for a moment. I just want to say quickly what huge pain and suffering in the animal life on this earth. There's been a lot of, we talk about, wars and great suffering in the human side, but we never talk about the animals. Huge suffering in the animals. Huge depletion of fish. Drift nets. I'm saying huge drift nets. We're just taking and taking and taking, and that's the economic juggernaut it takes. It's not in balance. It serves service to self. It's out of touch with the whole, is what I'm trying to reflect here. This is the imbalance that we're dealing with. And the psychological imbalance is also reflective of that as well. When we're not having sufficient positive and, input in order to deal with and have the resilience to cope with the negative side. If everyone becomes super, super negative, this is where mental health issues come in. So I want to go back to nature. Quite a lot of species have already had the 6th extinction event. Pardon me. My milkshake. Ice caps are melting. Serious, serious problem. Antarctica, Arctic, ice melt, shifts the electromagnetic field. Earth tilt. Military activity destabilizing through exploding munitions and nuclear weapons, big ones. I'm also feeling a shift in the earth from that. Because not only do we have atomic weapons, we've got the megaton, million-ton weapons. I considered 10,000, I don't know what the latest statistics are on nuclear weapons, but 10,000 on either side, US and Russia. But we've also got other smaller countries, Pakistan, India, Israel has 200. But there's no talk about that, interestingly enough. There should be, given the strong responses against others who may well be putting together weapons programs, which have proved to be not a threat, in truth. So there's, I just want to concentrate more on the nuclear, not so much the politics of it. splitting of the atom, fusion. So even at the subatomic level, these things impact on the whole as well as you muck around with nature. Genetic modification is another thing. Billions of years to create genetics that worked in respect of natural selection on the planet, favouring the most adaptable. That's how sustainability worked in nature, it was responsive to climatic change. As those gene arrays favoured a certain gene or genes, which gave that species the edge competitively, and it survived. Others died off. And the question for humanity is, are we going to die off because we're not adapting? That's the fundamental question. And so these wars that play out in our minds, and that's where they start. You say, oh, you're a this and you're a that. You're my enemy. No, you're not. You're all part of the same human condition. With the one species, we can all interact and have babies together, which means we're the one species. But you can play your war games, but it's not going to serve anyone, particularly you, because the law of cause and effect is a natural law, and what you put out comes back. That's why the US is undergoing some turmoil, because it's having a natural response coming back to it. And this is the revelations that are happening through various whistleblowers. And they're going to increase, the whistleblowers will increase, because what you try to suppress will get stronger. That's a natural law as well. What you resist persists, what you look at disappears. What you look at means looking for the truth of it. And that's another solution, by the way, is going still is one. Another is look for the truth in the matter. Is it true? Byron Katie comes to mind. Go to thework.com. Is it true? Can you be absolutely sure that it's true? How do you feel? How do you react when you believe the thought that the world has been taken over? Full spectrum dominance. Who would you be without the thought? Turn it around. What is it I'm seeking to control? Can I step back from all of that and control nothing? What sort of world do I want to have? So law of attraction comes in. Well, I want a world that's not where everyone's controlling everybody. I don't want that. I want to see freedom in its true form, which is the freedom to self-determine, the freedom to follow one's own dreams, the freedom to act on impulse and spontaneity in wonderful ways. I envisage a future of an evolved society where what we do to another, we do to ourselves, where everyone is my teacher, they'll have no enemy. And if something's coming to me that's of a negative persuasion, I know that on some level there's something to heal within me if I feel a negative response towards it. I'm feeling a threat. This is a high level perspective that I'm sharing, and it takes many years to get to this because I know I've been working on it for a long time. I'm getting better and better and clearer as I go because I keep working on the truth of matters. And I like the idea of going with the flow of life, not trying to force anything, not seeking out popularity, not trying to get the most money, but allowing life to give me whatever it is I need. What I need, I want, or what I want, I need. In other words, need equals want. I have exactly what I need, even if it's basic meals, even if it's basic shelter. How do I know I need it? I got it. How do I know I don't need it? I don't have it. That's homeostasis. That's why peace is actually the recalibration with Earth systems, because until you can come to peace with great chaos and change, it's not even really chaos. These are all logical responses to systems that are out of whack with the blueprint of nature, which is the sum of the parts is the whole. It actually expands on the whole. Everything is companion. Everything is cooperative in this system. It's not. Now, we might say, well, this species is competing against that and it dies off. Nature doesn't see itself as competing. It's more to do with which is more adaptable. The species, and some may argue, well, that more aggressive species survived because that other one didn't fight back. Well, I don't know. Is that true? There's also climatic conditions. There's predators. So nature's quite an involved, complicated situation, but it is well designed because of the species working within their own areas, not eating up everything, moving on. The seasons enabled the land to rest. It's an incredibly compassionate system in actual fact. Harmony is incredibly compassionate, and even if animals eat each other, that's part of life, living off life. And we might look at it sometimes as cruel, but I actually think the natural world is far kinder. Humans tend to be more cruel because they're in so much pain that they haven't acknowledged. And I'd like to say to those who are engaged in the war mentality that really what's beneath all of that is great pain within you. The need to dominate, the need to control, the need to be seen as better than, the need to have power. Because you feel on top of the world, you feel you can maintain that life. But life changes always. And all cycles move on. Even in product life cycles, we see them introduced, peter out at the top, and then they go into decline. And we're at a point in history right now where it's all going, a particular way of life is actually in decline. Now, one can try and control and keep it going, but it's really in decline. The environment is making that very clear. And the people will speak up for a world that survives. They don't want to be in starvation. We all have a responsibility. We all have the ability to respond. So I might leave it with real hope, because that's also a solution. Stillness, truth, and real hope. Real hopes, I'll use the S on the end. So responsibility means you have the ability to respond. You can do something, speak up, but do it non-violently and do it with love, like I'm doing, because there is no enemy. We're just living out competing interests, which will move us towards cooperation. Empathy is to stand in the shoes of the other. If I was in the military, what would I be feeling, thinking, doing? If I was in the IT industry, what would I be thinking, feeling and doing if I was in government, etc. So we stand in the shoes of one another, and that's the highest love and respect, really. Awareness is to open your eyes, to look around and to notice, to draw upon sources that, if you can get neutral sources, that's better. Not that really anyone is neutral, but let's just say someone who's well thought out information on what's going on. Maybe move around a few sources so that you're not being brainwashed by one. Have a look at all sides. But ultimately, you become the arbitrator, the arbiter of what is true for you. I read a lot. I'm looking a lot. I'm thinking a lot, reflecting a lot. I come up with many insights. It's how awareness works within me, and stillness is another. Love means we care, share, reveal, and heal. So these revelations from Snowden and Assange are actually a wave of love moving across the planet, revealing what's been hidden. What's been suppressed is being opened up. So the world is getting to have a look at it. And that disruption is to what they thought was true. They're realizing things were not as they seem. And they're also feeling, the scrutiny of being surveilled themselves. Honesty is to speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And I'll say, so help me God, for those of that way. Try to be as honest as you can, and that means even looking at yourself, where you might be wrong. And that includes me as well. That's why I said I could be wrong. That was my truth. Because I'm not looking for devotees of me. I'm looking for sharing, because that's where I'm caring. Honesty means we can speak at many levels of truth. You can speak truth sensitively. Let's not condemn each other. You know, down with them. Let's not have witch hunts for anybody. And that includes Assange and Snowden. Everyone is doing the best they can, and they're speaking what they feel to be true. And of course, if we really to have the whole truth of things, it could possibly look differently. But you'd have to have a very radically open mind to be able to access that sort of truth. There's also underlying truths that we're here to learn something. And sometimes we have to go through what we're not in order to find who we are. So we may have to go through that dark shadow, as they say, go through the shadow side of self in order to resurface and integrate aspects of ourselves that we've not dealt with because we've suppressed it. The suppression is very problematic when it comes to truth because we're not willing to face things as they really are. We go into denial. And that's everybody. I've seen people wander off when you reveal a truth to them that they aren't ready to accept, because their whole world then comes down and people are frightened of that. Oneness is that we're all one world, one planet. We all breathe the same air. We have families. We love. We cry. In truth, we're in the most beautiful world that we share. And to really learn to share with that diversity, and I'm now talking to those who very much are pushing totalitarian regimes, you've got to learn to share with everyone. It's not just about your own quarter. It's not just about service to self and everyone else can go and eat cake. They're not going to. And when you pass over into the next life, you will have a better, clearer perspective on the fears that were driving your totalitarianism and the fact that you're emotionally shut down because you weren't able to feel the others. And I don't see that as a crime. I just see it as a state of mind that's been programmed. So, oneness, love, honesty, oneness, love, enjoyment. We're here to be happy, gross national happiness. We're here to now reconstruct a new paradigm that is really about everybody's happiness. And all I can say from my perspective is when I'm in alignment with truth, and we're not talking necessarily factual truth here, this is when I look at you, I see me. That's a truth. What you put out comes back. Cause and effect, that's a truth. Love shares, heals, reveals, shares, cares, reveals, and heals. That is a truth. Love is very healing of our planet. So love is another solution in all of this. You have to love the other, even the ones you think are perpetrating the great crimes on the planet. They're out of alignment with the balance of the planet, which is why love would make you speak up like I'm speaking up, because that can't be continued. If it is you want life to continue on the planet, we have to speak up. So peace is balance, yin and the yang, the harmony. Harmony means you and me. Harmony is singing together the one song. What I call the universe. It's the one verse. We all want the same thing in truth. We're just seeing differently, that's all. Service is when you have all the universal values aligned within you, you will naturally serve the other as yourself. Service is a sharing. It's not a taking, it's a giving. Sometimes it's a taking too, because you may have to take in order to teach another to give. When I'm in a homeless capacity, people may feel moved to give to me, and I allow that because they're learning to share. They're actually realising and expanding a perception of themselves. By giving to me, they're including me in their sphere of concern, and that's a very good thing for harmony. I don't then, through the state of being homeless, say to that other that you owe me. You don't. Either I don't stay too long so they don't feel obligated. Their space is not crowded out. And may my presence in that space be a gift to them, not a hindrance. I see no mistakes. Things come to me in really interesting ways, and I know I'm to learn about something. When I'm doing my research into what's going on, I'm not looking at it as a tool or a weapon against someone else. I'm only looking at it because I'm trying to more deeply understand them out of love for them. Because surely you would want to assist someone who's having a difficulty, who's creating a difficulty, who's bullying. You would want to help them to look at that situation differently because it's not in their highest interests. That's the only reason you do something, is it's not in the other's highest interest. It's not in your highest interest. It's not in the children's highest interest. I tend to look at children a lot. So this video has been in service to humanity. It's in service to the United States, those who are in power at this time and those influencing power. It's also a service to my own government, who see themselves as very strongly aligned with ideas and ideologies. And the feeling I get is puts them between a rock and a hard place. Difficult circumstances, they're sitting there a little bit like piggy in the middle. And that may not do well for the future for this country. It can also make Australia a target because we get caught up in other people's conflicts, and we have been involved in other people's conflicts, not dealing with our own situation. I also send love to Julian Assange, and may he be treated with respect for what he's done, whether you agree with him or not. It takes a lot of courage to do what he's done. And I see many people now talking ethical hacking. There is no such thing, but you're still breaching privacy. Although if it's going to save a million lives, okay, we do what we have to do in order to save lives. In the commercial world, you're not saving lives, you're getting trade secrets. That's cheating in that commercial game, and that's only going to create distrust in the commercial community, business community, as everyone tries to come up to speed with all the technologies that give them an advantage through cyber surveillance, through phone tapping, stingray type equipment where they're listening in on other people, using devices that they can plant so they can hear them having conversations. That is a spiral to the bottom. Do you keep escalating in that cyber reality, in the mistaken belief that you're creating an industry that's going to be sustainable, which it's not? As I said in my previous videos, it's like the stock market. It's not like a manufacturing sector that has been a basis to economic growth as we know it. The ecological problem around that renders the economic paradigm unable to harmoniously work with the natural systems, which makes that system harmful to nature. So with all the cyber stuff that's going on, where they're completely distracted by all the little war games that they're playing now in industry and have done for quite some time, their eye is off the ball in terms of the environmental discord that's being disrupted, because they still have not dealt with their own inner discord and imbalance as they seek domination through economic paradigms. So we haven't learnt the lessons in respect of the military, the militarization, the weaponization of life, where one is attacking another. We're still bullying. We're still harming each other, which means that's quite an unevolved state of being. This point in time, we're moving now to another trajectory. We have to make peace. Peace is the security. It's not peace and security. Peace is security because it's balance with life. It's balance of the negative and the positive. And as we get into higher frequencies, that love intensifies and we see nothing that we disapprove of, because we understand that the world is acting out of something that we don't understand. And I'll finish this with the apparition that I saw in that flat in Strathmore. He walked right past me and my friend. There was a consciousness very much in the same space as us, outside of this paradigm. That is why we're having a paradigm shift, because things outside this paradigm are becoming visible. And that's how we get greater clarity around where we have been and now where we are going. And we are going into a love-based reality in the future. We will be self-reliant. We will live in harmony with the natural world. And our adventures will grow in ways that'll be probably beyond belief, I would think. So I'm going to leave you with that. I love everyone. May the fast be with you, not the force. And just know that your happy destiny is unavoidable. Much love. Bye.